Good evening. I'd like to call to order the November 14th, 2023 regular board meeting. I'd like to announce that the meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. At this time, if all would like to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time we'll have a brief moment of silent meditation. Mr. Longwell, roll call.
Mr. Bradley?
Here.
Mr. Burkhardt?
Here.
Dr. Lebo?
Here.
Mrs. Maris?
Here.
Ms. Morgan is present via phone. Dr. Rhodes? Mr. Stanker?
Here.
And Mr. Rupp.
Here. Item 1.06, endorsement of agenda. Any changes or additions to the agenda tonight, Mr. Longwell?
There are no changes or additions, Mr. Rupp, and the agenda will otherwise stand as written.
Item 1.07, reading of minutes of the regular meeting of October 3rd, 2023, and a special meeting of October 24th, 2023. Any board members have any additions, corrections, or discussions on those two documents? Seeing none, will be accepted as printed, Mr. Longwell. Move on to item 2, hearing of visitors of items on the meeting agenda. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents of the school district. At this time, we have reached the first opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments related to items that are listed on the evening's agenda for a vote. A second opportunity for public comment will occur at the end of the meeting. The second opportunity for public comment is reserved for comments on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you'd like to address the board, please come up to the podium and share your name and district address. This is for items that are on the agenda to be voted on at tonight's meeting. Sir?
Yes, my name is Eric Fairchild, and I was elected last week as a Brown Township Commissioner, and I hope to forge, a better working relationship with the school district, particularly in the Park and Rec area. But during the course of my campaign, I got to know Robert Schaefer, who was running for the position in Region 1, and just was impressed with the man every time I heard him speak. I know of his credentials and his wisdom, and I just think he would be a good choice to fill out the vacancy. And it would probably, anytime you can get new blood on a board, I think it's helpful. So just encourage the consideration of Robert Schaefer.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment for items that are on the agenda? Yes, sir.
Robert Schaefer, 904 Peachtree Drive. One comment, one question. First, I would like to congratulate the senior high and presumptively the school board for the new course proposal for the Social Studies Department at the high school, America's Civil Rights Movement, which I read the outline of the syllabus on your agenda report, and I think it is a well thought out course and will be helpful, especially in these times. The question that I have is on a different proposal. It's for item 1102, the new business on policy. So there's new language for the athletic eligibility and policies and extracurriculars. And my question is what the rationale is for the switch on the extracurricular language from very specific criteria about participation to a statement that says eligibility requirements as approved by the superintendent. In other words, in the past, the language for both seemed almost identical, not identical, but very close. Now the language for athletics as compared to other extracurriculars is very different. And so my question is, what's the rationale for that change? And in terms of when the superintendent releases requirements, are those posted? Are those consistent across the different extracurricular activities, or are they more targeted for, you know, one activity versus another? Okay.
Any other public comment for items that are listed on the agenda for tonight's vote? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, reports and presentations. Item 3.01, Superintendent of Schools report, Dr. Leidy.
Yes, good evening. It's good to see everybody. Tonight I have 2 items on my report, and the first one is I see several of our friends here from Northside Elementary joining us. As the board knows, and I will share with everybody in the audience tonight, one of the best parts of sitting at this table is having the opportunity to hear from our students and representing the different schools. The board made a decision a year or so ago that they would visit certain schools and then also had the opportunity for other schools to come and do a presentation. And so tonight we're happy to have representatives from Northside Elementary here, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Rudisil to kick it off for us.
Thank you. Well, good evening, and thank you for allowing us to be here. We're very excited. I brought an all-star crew with me tonight. We have our school counselor, Mrs. Saxton.
Hi, good to see you guys. I think I saw you guys back in February or March at the same spot, so good to see everyone again.
We have a 3rd grade student, Bella. We have a 2nd grade student, Audrey, and a 2nd grade student, Isaiah, joining us tonight. So thank you guys for joining us. So tonight we are going to talk about Northside Elementary, the Wildcat Way, positive behavior and intervention supports. And the reason we looked at that was it falls in line with our district comprehensive goal number 2, and more specifically the second bullet where it talks about developing a shared understanding and philosophy of student behavior. And so when we look at that, we looked at what are we going to focus on. Obviously we focus on behavior, but we built a PBIS team that consisted of not some students, but I'm sorry, a school counselor, a school psychologist, several teachers, staff members, and then what we looked at was what can we do from a tier 1 perspective. And so you hear me say tier 1 a lot tonight, and the next slide I'll explain the difference with the different tiers, and then we'll look into that a little bit more. So when you look about tiers, we look at a triangle and look at the base of it, and that's what we call tier 1. And the idea of tier 1 is we develop these expectations for all students across the school. And then we specifically then teach about those expectations in a natural setting, a school environment, where we get very detailed on how we use the bathroom, how we walk in the hallway, how we play at recess, even how we interact with each other. And then sometimes we have students that may need a special reminder, so we go down to what we call tier 2, and we have some small groups, check in, check out with students, see how they're doing. And then from there, we still have students that seem to struggle with the overall expectations. We go down to a tier 3, and we meet them at their individual needs and level to make sure that they're going to be successful at school. So really, when you look at tier 1, we're looking at about 80–90% of our students are going to understand and do the school-wide positive approach that we take. We reinforce behaviors with some type of token economy, and we provide that corrective feedback when necessary on everything that we do. And when we look at that, we look at it a lens through equity and equality. And I'm going to have Mrs. Saxton kind of explain that process.
Yeah, and when we look at this through kind of a behavior lens, we can also apply it, equality being treating each student the same way to be successful and act in a responsible manner, whereas equity means that we're treating each student in a way that provides them what they need to be successful. So for some students, if we're looking through that behavior lens, we might be reinforcing one student for something that they've been working really, really hard to achieve, a skill or maybe a deficit that we're celebrating, whereas another student might already be proficient in that skill. So they might be working on something different. So each of our classroom teachers and the adults, the natural supports that work with them, are working to reinforce the needed, the skills that they need in order to be successful in the learning environment. And now I'm going to interview some of our students who are living and breathing this token economy and this Tier 1 system every single day. So my first student that I am going to interview is Miss Audrey here. Audrey is in 2nd grade, and she's going to talk to us about the paw print ticket. So in that picture, you'll see it's a big clip art of the paw print ticket, but students receive these individual, like where it says north side, the individual squares on a daily basis. So Audrey, can you share with the group, how can you earn a paw print ticket at Northside?
You can be a kind friend, and you can really work hard, and you can be a good listener when the teacher is talking.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Can you tell us about a time that you can remember that you earned a paw print ticket?
When the teacher was talking and I wasn't talking.
So you were reinforced and given a paw print ticket for being quiet on the carpet. Awesome. And then, as you can see, as Audrey explained, the paw print tickets are handed out to students exhibiting any one of our characteristics of the Wildcat Way. Communicate with respect, achieve personal goals, tackle challenges, and serving others. So I would guess Audrey received that ticket for communicating with respect by showing her teacher that she was ready to go. She was listening on the carpet. And then Audrey, can you tell us a little bit about what happens when you earn 15 paw print tickets?
When you earn 15, you get a certificate that says Wildcat Wow, and then you get to pick a box.
Yep, which leads us into our next certificate. Audrey was referring to the Wildcat Wow ticket. So Bella is going to tell us a little bit more about what happens when you earn those 15 paw print tickets. So Bella, what exactly might happen when you earn 15 paw print tickets?
You will get the Wildcat paper, and then you get to take it home, and then you'll fill out on the paper what you can do on a day.
So what types of, so when this goes home and when you earn 15 tickets, what might happen in the classroom? What celebrations might happen for you?
Like pajama day, half day of crazy hair day, and all other things.
Yeah, which is really fun and really motivating, right? So teachers are able to kind of differentiate per student and per class the types of things that they implement in the classroom for when students are achieving their Wildcat Wow ticket. And then what happens at home when you take that? When you take that home?
You can either like save it up to see how much you have, like do a little race with your brothers or sisters, or you can also like just save it, or you can put it in the trash can.
Do people? Thanks for sharing. So what I'm hearing you say is you get lots of like good jobs, and people are really happy when you earn one of those. How does that make you feel when you earn?
Excited and happy.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. And this just a goal with our Tier 1 practices this year. We were, due to this PBIS team, we were able to implement some changes to our Tier 1 practices, and this was a specific change that we made. And we had the reason being we are able with this system to recognize more students per month, which is, speaks to those equitable practices.
And I'll say since the start of school till currently, we have given out over 300 Wildcat Wows that have gone home to parents to celebrate success. Along with that, with our Tier 1 is the classroom management plan, which is so important. And that's kind of what Bella alluded to also. Teachers are giving out those little Wildcat paw prints for all the things that the students are doing on a daily basis to recognize their efforts. But the nice thing is they can customize their classroom management plan. So one of the common themes, though, you see regardless of the classroom management plan is the CATS rules and the expectations. but they also talk about the Wildcat Wow cards. They have positive incentives in there. You heard Bella talk about Pajama Day, Crazy Hair Day, which is a favorite of mine. So a whole bunch of different things that we do that are just a great way to support our kids. But one of the other big things that they talk about is the new Super Paul at Northside.
This is the big word on the street is our Super Paul. And I am super excited to say all 3 of these students have earned their Super Paul. There was another student who we were hoping to join us today, but unfortunately he couldn't. But his name is Nico, and he's the little first grader up top. But Isaiah here is going to tell us a little bit about what makes the Super Paul so special. So tell us all about the Super Paul.
So you basically, it's sort of a bigger version of a paw print, and then you earn it for going above and beyond with kindness. Like the first one is communicate with respect. The second one is achieve personal goals, tackle challenges, and then serve others. So basically, you earn them and then you put them on the board in the hallway with the cat on the side.
So say you earn a Super Paul, right? Your teacher or a staff member or Dr. Rudisill or Mrs. Saxon gives you a Super Paul. What happens as soon as you get that Super Paul?
You head down to the office and then they get your picture for the, like whatever month it is for the Super Paul at the community meeting. They get the picture of all the Super Paul winners.
Yep. So you see, those are the pictures that they took, and the big thing with the Super Paul is it's immediate. It's immediate reinforcement to reward them for that positive behavior, and it is really going above and beyond. And the past 3 months, we have had a monthly focus. This monthly focus is what?
Tackle challenges.
Tackling challenges. So we've been focusing on the T and the CATS. So anytime a student is observed going above and beyond in the classroom, they have the opportunity to earn that Super Paul. So while you're here, would you be comfortable sharing with the board member how you earned your Super Paul? And I think we've had multiple. There's some kiddos who have gotten it more than once. Bella, do you want to share with the board members how you earned your Super Paul? Or what you did to earn?
I put my friend's supplies away while he was going to the bathroom.
Which was really kind of you. Awesome. Congratulations.
My first one, when I was being a really kind friend and always listening, and my second one was my classroom was messy, so I cleaned it up without being asked.
Congratulations. Isaiah?
So I got mine being quiet during music while everyone was talking.
Congratulations. So we are super proud of these kiddos and their accomplishments, but also all the accomplishments of the students at Northside and our PBIS team, because we're really proud of some of the new practices that we've been implementing Tier 1.
So when the students come down, they come down with a paw print that has their name on it and then what they did for it. And then from there, like I said, we take their picture, we put it up there, and then when we get to the community meeting, we have something special they receive, and that's what Audrey has tonight, and they all get a certificate to take home also to let their parents know. The pictures are sent to the teachers, and the teachers share the pictures via Seesaw with the parents.
Do you have
also.
the pictures on the next slide?
And then obviously, all this ties into us building a community from a Tier 1 level and what we can do with our kids. So monthly, we bring our kids together to talk about a community meeting. And at the end of that community meeting, we take all our Super Paul winners, and you can see there's quite a few there from September and October, and we get their pictures taken, and we recognize them for their excellent job in front of the whole school of everything they were able to do. To date, we have over 75 Super Paul winners, and more on the way every day. One of the things we do at the end of the day that I think the students enjoy, if you get a Super Paul, what happens at the end of the day? That's so exciting.
They say your name on the announcements.
Oh yes, the whole school knows that you received the Super Paul today. Absolutely. And that's kind of what we do on a daily basis to make sure that our students feel safe, they feel secure, and they feel welcomed in our school. And that's how we achieve the Wildcat Way at Northside. Thank Thank you for your time.
Questions or comments from anybody on the board? I'd just like to say, being on the school board, that my favorite thing is always when the students present to us. It makes the job worthwhile, just to see the enthusiasm you people have. It helps.
Yeah.
I feel like we need a positive behavioral enforcement
For
for
adults.
this. No, for sure, but like for tackling the challenge of coming and presenting to the school board is pretty awesome. So good work, everybody. I thought it was really cool. Thank you.
So I'm hearing possible Super Pulse tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Actually,
I'm just doling them out here, right here. Yeah.
Too.
It's really hard to talk to a group like this, and that was very impressive.
That was excellent.
We practiced a couple times.
That's
so
good.
We've had some firsts at Northside. We had a class that actually received a Super Bowl
Oh.
for serving others and communicating with respect. We had a class that made the day of Messiah College. We send our copies over there.
Mhm.
So a class sent a letter over signed by all the kids, thanking them for all the work they do for us. And we got an email back from Messiah saying they have never received something like that, and they were so appreciative of that. And so we were able to do that. And actually, that teacher might be sitting here watching second grade there. Princess Lava. And today we had our first teacher receive a super call for tackling a challenge. Dr. Russo may not have been in the building in the morning due to an appointment. So I had to have someone step in and do the morning announcements. And we asked first year physical education teacher, Mr. Myers, to step in to do it. He was very nervous, and I hear it went very well. You might have forgot to do the pledge, right? Yeah. But tackling that challenge and putting himself out there, several third grade students came to me and said they thought he deserved to have a super call for tackling the challenge today. So we made sure to recognize him today at the end of the day, didn't we? We got his picture too. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you,
being here.
guys.
Great job,
Thank you.
all of you. Nicely done.
Super proud of you guys.
One of the best things about this is that when we sit at this table and talk about things like a comprehensive plan, which may feel so far removed at times from the students, but to be able to see that language translated to a building and then the application of it with students, that's, I think, what makes these kind of presentations so valuable. And just to reiterate a couple of things that Dr. Rudisil said, the idea of building community. When we did our comprehensive plan and we had the stakeholders contributing to that comprehensive plan, that was an area that the stakeholders who were part of that process identified as something that we want to make sure that every child that comes into our school feels like they belong in our school, that they feel safe and welcomed. And there you go. There's an example of what one of our buildings is doing through positive behavior support. I think it's really important to recognize that. So great job. Thank you again. The second item under my report this evening is connected to, frankly, a compliance requirement that we have around the funding that we get from the federal government through the ESSER funds. And it is, yes, you're all welcome to head out. You don't have to stick around.
Exciting.
It only gets boring after this. Well, no, I didn't mean that. It's going to be great. There's a lot of wonderful things.
Wow.
For the students.
No footprint for you.
So as part of the compliance for the ESSER funding, there is a requirement that we go back and we review our health and safety plan and health and safety update. And I can say to the board that that has been done from an administrative point of view. We are headed into a flu season here again, and so our nurses are constantly talking about hygiene practices, et cetera, with our staff. But I am also happy to report to you that from a health and safety update perspective, we are in compliance with what we have in our plan.
Any questions for Dr. Leidy on the health and safety update? Concludes my report. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3.02, Cumberland Perry Area Career and Technical Center report, Mr. Sanger.
Thank you. I do have a lengthier update tonight, so just bear with me. But I thought it would be a good update for the board. I'm going to start by discussing the fuel leak at the CTC from October 17th. PA American Water discovered fuel in their intake in their water treatment plant a little bit downstream from where the CTC is, and they traced it back upstream to the CTC. I wrote it down. Why am I looking at this? It was identified as coming from an underground diesel fuel tank, which the building used as a backup fuel source for the boilers. So they used natural gas typically, but this fuel tank was there as the backup. And they haven't needed to use the tank in at least 15 years, but they regularly perform maintenance on the tank. The tank itself, the size is about 8,000 gallons. They don't know yet how much leaked out, but a lot of it. What happened was the tank just happened to be beside the underground stormwater pipe. So the leak went right into the drain that left the campus and went under 114 and down to the conduit went. It began cleanup efforts right away. DEP and Silver Spring Township and CTC insurance adjuster were all there on site. Mr. LeMay, the board chair, and I were both there as well to kind of have I don't know why we were there. We were there to make sure it was all happening, but the experts were there is what I mean to tell you. So we joined the group on the 19th. The fuel spill was contained at that point. There wasn't any issues with the students, though the PM session, which mechanics was a part of, on the 17th was canceled that day. It happened quite nicely in one sense that the CTC was closed for 2 days for students so that they could have building tours for the 8th graders in the region that we serve. So that was kind of fortunate, but that there wasn't any loss of instructional time other than that PM session. So that's good. The bad news is the 3,300 or so 8th graders that we were going to send through there kind of threw everything out of whack, and they now have I just heard tonight we have a new date in the spring for them. So that's all happening too. Cleanup costs are large, and there's a lot more to still do on campus. Even though the leak itself is contained, it's still in the ground. A lot of the leak has seeped into the ground. We authorized use of the capital reserve funds at the JOC meeting that we had on the 23rd to help pay for the cleanup efforts, but we may exhaust that small reserve. The CTC doesn't carry much in reserves, just by the way that it was structured organizationally. Insurance coverage is the next step of that, but of course there's still like a gap between when the bills need to be paid and when the insurance check is cut, if insurance covers it ultimately. So more information there, and I think that's sort of the one relevant part, other than no real student issue from this, was that costs were something that was unforeseen and possibly something that the CTC itself will have to bear if depending on what the insurance coverage looks like. So more to come on that, but I thought I'd give you the update there.
Why wouldn't insurance cover?
There are because they haven't determined the cause yet precisely, whether it was the tank itself leaked or it was a line, what caused that. So I think that's the question mark right now. You'd think, that the dates I'm giving you are about a month ago at this point, so you'd think.
They could have figured it out by now.
Yeah, you'd think so. I don't really know. I'm in pretty regular communication with what's going on. It's just they haven't kind of determined that. And then beyond that, there's just what does the policy cover? And so I don't know yet.
A lot of policies have riders to cover or not to cover underground tanks.
Right.
And also environmental cleanup sometimes requires you to have an extra rider to, that's why I was gonna ask if you knew if they had if it, does it cover environmental cleanup? Do we know that much even?
It's not worth speculating. I saw the policy, but I confess I didn't read through everything on it. But yes, those are definite issues, right? That are problems with it, and also, we're not a sheets in that we don't deal in underground tanks for a living, right? So it's like, why don't we have a rider for the underground tank that we never used? I don't know. It's a good question. So something we'd have in the future, right?
Back in the 1990s, West Shore Country Club had the exact same problem.
Oh, yeah?
They had an underground tank for all their maintenance equipment, that they just bought their fuel in bulk, and the tank leaked. I was involved in that because I had to survey the spoil piles of all the soil they had to remove to be remediated.
Sounds like fun. A different capital reserve fund at the West Shore Country Club, I think, than the CTC, unfortunately.
Just to let you know, there are other facilities that have the same problem.
Yeah.
How much have we already, or have you, through the CTCC, already authorized to be used for this?
It was in the neighborhood of like 300 grand or so when we looked at it last, and they haven't been giving me a daily update on that, but they aren't on site now. When I got there, I was like, I was imagining like the, I don't know, 24-hour a day, big lights and a big cleanup effort, and it wasn't like that. So I think that's a good thing from a cost perspective. They kind of figured out it's contained, we're good, but it's still costly, and you got to use the approved provider that DEP has. And fortunately, they were the ones that I think were already on site at PA American Water, coincidentally. So it was good that they were there and were able to get started. But yeah, it's and if the question next is what's in the capital reserve, I should probably remember that too, but I don't. But it's not much more than that. I would say it's probably south of $1 million. There's a limit on what we can. What the limit is too.
Well, and some of that is connected to the construction project.
For sure.
So
for sure.
There's some real implications here beyond just the tank.
Yes. Well, yeah, we were using the capital reserve as a lot of the not prepayment, but paying the cost before the bond issue, which, there's continual work being done on site and site work and getting the planning together and the architecture fees. So yes, it's a problem.
Do we know if this cost, can it be directly put back to the host school districts? I mean, do we know if we're directly liable, or if we not?
Ultimately,
if it exceeds, say, the insurance, what the insurance pays.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the budget that's created by the JOC and by the CTC comes from the district. So yeah, if it was we need to replenish funds here, or we have a deficit, it would have to be made up by the district.
That's why I'm so interested.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's the real thing.
We're on the hook for this.
Yeah.
If the insurance doesn't cover it. And then I have another question that's slightly unrelated to Dr. Leidy. Do we have any of these tanks?
That's a good question. I don't know. We might need to investigate that.
And if
nothing-
we do we have a rider to insure it?
Yeah.
Point made.
Yeah.
And on that note, not to micromanage, but you have some influence there. I know, the positions you hold there, even if not required under the law, if it's going to be rebuilt, I would highly suggest it's being done to today's standards, even if it's a repair, like that we make it, that those.
Don't worry, the tank's coming out.
It's going to be abandoned,
It
never
will
going
be-
to do it again.
It's going away. That won't be an issue in the future from that standpoint. The boilers themselves they were at one point part of the project. Not necessarily, there's nothing really, that's not the issue. The boilers aren't the issue, and the current source to heat the building isn't the issue. It just happens to be this secondary.
No, I'm just saying, if we're gonna keep a tank, and even if it was considered a repair, and it could stay in the old way, my suggestion is to make sure that we actually do it in a environmentally more friendly way today, that if there is a leak, it's much easier to contain it without going into the groundwater and creating.
They said it had just been tested, so I have zero confidence in that. I just like the tank to go away.
It's going away. That's what's gonna happen. There won't be one coming back in, so that's a good.
That's better yet.
Yeah.
As far as Dr. Leidy's point, we can do a little additional research. Our current systems are natural gas, but I'd hate to speak in absolutes, because that's not to say that at some point in history.
Just like
there
theirs
one
was.
buried, yeah. Because to your point, Mrs. Maris, at a previous district, that was the format where you had two different types of boilers. So we had coal boiler, and then we had an oil boiler, and there was a tank underground, and I think that was pretty typical of school construction. So maybe at some point in the past, but.
Yeah. Dig up these tanks and find out.
Learn that somebody else's.
I mean, we're still gonna pay, it sounds like, potentially, but
Yes.
yes. less all
I'm-
our expenses.
I'm hopeful. I mean, I can't say anything. I don't know anything about what the insurance is doing. But they were there on site at the beginning, and it's one of those, like, they were watching the process happen, and it wasn't one of those like, well, I wish you'd called us 2 days earlier
Yeah.
before you pulled the tank out of the ground. So that was good and important. And also, I do think I was joking earlier that, you know, what was I doing there? We were there just making sure, you know, that everything was moving and on your behalf in terms of like things are being done the right way. And you know, we had some questions about. It was again fortunate that that the building was closed for 2 days and the tours were done. There was an air quality question at the beginning, which was like, look, this will be, you know, solved and no problem. And the students were able to go back on Friday, so it was all good that way. And in fact, and then the community also, that there wasn't any issue in the groundwater. It just so happens all of the houses on that right around the CTC are on well water, just to make life even worse. But that was all tested. Everybody's fine that way. So everything's good except for the cleanup, which is on campus right now. And kind of if you're imagining where that is, it's right in front of the front entrance. That long stretch of grass is where there's a pipe that goes out and under. So that would be, you know, if you see them digging in the front there, they're pulling the soil out. And maybe Dennis, you're looking at the soil samples after the fact. I'm not sure.
It might be.
Yeah. So in other news, the JOC last met on October 23rd, where we reviewed in committee and then approved the budget for 24-25. Separate from this, because it was an unknown, we weren't going to, we weren't going to raise contribution rates or anything like that. We were just based on this because it was too early to talk about. But we, knowing that we have to approve our budget before it gets down the line to the 13 districts, and with a real changeover in the overall board composition come December, or when we would typically approve it. Not that there was any issue with the budget itself or that much could be moved around. It was like, well, this group has heard it and knows what's going on. Let's just vote on it. So we had it considered and so approved.
Related to that, what will you do if you have $1 million shortfall then?
It will be something we'll have to come back to the districts on if there's a need.
So like an ad hoc budget ask?
Yeah. Yeah. And it would have to come back and everybody would have to, each district would, I assume, have to vote on it too.
If they're willing to pay their whatever amount?
Yeah.
Okay.
But right now, everything, as I said, the funding right now for that is out of capital reserve, so it's not not impacting operations and shouldn't yet.
But if you empty that, you're not going to be able to do construction then, right?
We talked about that. We're not sure. You know, there are other steps before you get to let's just stop doing what we're doing. So I'm not going to talk about specifics of the budget for. I'll say that for Mr. Longwell later. I tried to pull that together, and the background on the PowerPoint that I got made it too hard to read the numbers. So it'll be a little easier for Mr. Longwell to distill that for us. We recognize several outgoing JOC members, notably Jean Rice from West Perry School District. Jean served on the board for 32 years, was twice chair of the JOC, and continues to be an advocate for vocational education. I mention this because many of you know Jean from serving on the IU board as well, where she was chair of that for a while and may be current chair. My head count is, I think, seven of the 18 JOC members are going to change over following the election, including all 3 of the regulars from West Shore. So a bigger sea change than in other years, but it happens. We cancel the November meeting each year, but we'll have a reorg meeting in the morning, Monday, December 11th at 7:30. And I plan to be there, and we'll recognize some of the other outgoing members at that point. That concludes my report.
Well, very good. Thank you for a good report. Do we have any questions for Mr. Sanker, additional questions for Mr. Sanker on his report? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3.03, Capital Area Intermediate Unit. Mr. Bradley.
The Intermediate Unit Board met on October 26th. Similar topics of budgets and things associated with staffing talked about some different career ready symposiums that they were doing in conjunction with the VOTEC, kind of getting the students, and that was earlier this month. Talked about the Imagination Library, and I think I had brought that forward at one point in time. That's the library system that Dolly Parton is putting her backing behind. They are currently up in a couple of the districts, still working to get it up and running in Cumberland County. And just as a reminder, that would be a book a month from birth to 5 years old for each person in a family, each child in the family. So a family of 5 children would get 5 books, so that each would have that sense of ownership of having their own books. It started in Tennessee, of course, where Dolly Parton's located, and it's becoming more and more widely spread. There are many areas where they're trying to get it started in Pennsylvania, and they're working to just get that additional funding in Pennsylvania to continue to expand it out. Cumberland County is one of the areas that they're working on getting that remaining amount of money that they need for it. They will, the organization will send the books. You just have to purchase the books at reduced cost. Another thing they talked about is Keola is turning 15 years, so they're having a Keola-con, much like a Comic-Con, but I don't think they're going to dress up like characters or anything for that, but they have a Keola-con coming up, celebrating 15 years and moving forward with that. Another interesting thing they talked about, similar to what we have with Operation Wildcat, they have something called Champions for Children. It's their similar program to help those in need. They talked a little bit about an interesting twist that what they did recently was, instead of getting clothing donated and then handing that clothing out, they were able to get funds and then actually give gift cards to the kids, and actually took the kids on a shopping spree, sort of to the mall, to give them that opportunity that you need a coat, you go pick the coat out that you want, within, of course, within reason and within price. So it was just a different twist on, you know, the donations and everything, but they have a mechanism as well that they use to service their students that are in need, which was good to hear. As Mr. Sanker said, we're also in the process of changing over in board members. I jokingly say a lot of the board members are retired folks that I'm meeting with, and a couple of them are did not seek re-election, and I think they're in the 20 to 25 years, like Miss Morgan, with the number of years that they've been on the board and have been servicing them. So Thursday of this week is our board meeting. It's been shifted up, and doing recognition for those board members that are moving off and moving on to other opportunities. And that's all I have to report.
Any questions for Mr. Bradley on his IU report? Mr. Bradley, thank you for a fine report. Move on to item 3.04, PSBA legislative report. I'd like to report that on November 4th was the annual delegates meeting. That is the time that the legislative agenda is reviewed and voted on. As Mrs. Maris will tell you, it can turn into a very long time, but I have to say is during COVID, they went to an online version, and now it's a hybrid version, and to me it has worked, and it was 1 hour and 52 minutes long.
Wow.
And all the agenda items that were recommended by the committee passed. So if there's any questions on any of those from anybody, feel free to ask them. So what was proposed all passed, and it really did take, it just went very well.
Not the same if you don't spend the day.
Right. And I mean, as Brian will also tell you, so much of it was just rhetoric. You know, it was people just
Getting on their soapbox.
absolutely, and then they would give their support, and you would have all kinds of unnecessary votes on things like the parliamentarian or rules you can't do, and it was democracy. It was in its truest form. It was interesting.
Made for a Saturday.
This time I thought it went very well. So
That's good to hear.
So that's what I have to report. Brian, do you have anything you'd like to add, or
No.
or anybody else on any legislative issues that have come up?
there's legislative issues, but I don't think we have to chat through them now.
We'll move on to item 3.05, Finance Facilities Committee report to Mr. Sanger.
Yes. The Finance and Facilities Committee met on October 24th. We had several items that are up for consideration tonight in the board meeting, including replacement HVAC system at Elmwood Academy we heard about. We heard on construction change orders. That was just information only, although we will have that up for approval tonight, but just as an update of current change orders and fund balance commitments for 2022, 2023, which was the kind of final version of commitments for that year, also on the agenda tonight. That concludes my report.
Any questions on the Finance and Facilities Committee report? Move on to item 3.06, Board President Report. Like an announcement of an executive session held on October 24th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Announcement of an executive session held on October 24th, 2023 at 8:40 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Announcement of an executive session held on November 14th, 2023 at 6:45 p.m. to discuss legal matters. An announcement of a meeting cancellation for the November 28th, 2023 Finance and Facilities Committee and work session. That concludes my President's report. Any questions on it? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, new business, school board vacancy. Item 5.01, appointment of a replacement school board director for Region 1. I'd just like to state that I came on the board in this fashion, as did, I know Mr. Sanker did, Tracy did, now deceased Judy Quigley did. And I will honestly say it's much easier to just run in a general election. It's extremely awkward, both for the board, me being on both sides, it's an extremely awkward, at least to me, being both either a board member or a potential candidate. All is done openly, publicly, all the discussion must be done open and publicly, and especially when you have two excellent candidates, or what appears to be. So it's an awkward moment for all of us, and I just want to let you two know that we feel the same way that you're feeling back there. So I'd just like to go over a couple things. Okay, we've reached the section of the agenda where we'll consider appointment of a replacement board director for the current vacancy on the school board. We, the board, will individually interview each candidate, asking a series of questions. It will be the same questions for both candidates. Following the interviews, the remaining board directors will vote individually, affirming their vote for one candidate. There will be a round of voting until one of the candidates reaches a minimum of 5 votes, and we can have discussion in between that as needed. If one receives a minimum of 5 votes at tonight's meeting, the appointee will join the district's notary public at the front of the meeting for the oath of office. And following that oath of office, the new board director will be seated and will participate in the remainder of the meeting. So at this time, before we start the interview process, it's not required under the law, it is an open public meeting, but out of courtesy to the candidates, it'd be nice if both candidates would step out of the room, and then we'll call in, and that's particularly so that the person that goes second doesn't get to hear the questions ahead of time. So, and again, I can't require that, but if you two would politely step out, we'll get you as needed for the interview process. So, thank you very much. Okay, at this time, is there any further questions procedurally on what we're going to be doing here? Or, again, I'll ask a series of 5 questions to each candidate, at which time they'll be reseated. Then I'll open the floor to discussion amongst ourselves. And when that ends, Mr. Longwell will take a roll call vote. And just so the public also knows, this is one of those things that under school code, it requires 5 votes. And as board directors, we can vote for one or none of the candidates. If neither gets 5 votes in the first round, I'll reopen the floor to discussion for a second round, and we'll do a second vote. And if that still doesn't bring out a candidate, I'll probably make a motion to table the meeting, and then we'll have a special meeting, say next week, where we can continue it. That's in practice of what we've done in the past when we've reached an impasse on this. So
I know you indicated we were going to ask the same questions to both candidates, but there's one candidate where it feels like it's appropriate to ask a separate question about why they didn't run in the election for Mr. Bradley. Is it appropriate to ask that question? Or?
Well, the solicitor advised that we didn't give an advantage or disadvantage to either of them by asking something specific to one of them. And my hopes would be that that would come out in an answer of, when you look at the general nature of the questions of why they're interested, I would certainly hope if that candidate wants to be considered because of the circumstances, that they would bring that forth themselves.
Makes sense.
And then again, it's something that, if we want to discuss it after we interview them amongst ourselves, we most certainly could, and that in itself might be a reason.
Lean a certain way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that satisfy you?
Okay.
Ms. Morgan is muted. Do you want to unmute her for this, or just when we?
She'll be unmuted as needed to
Okay,
discuss. And her and I discussed, along with the tech people, the problems we've had before. So if we do start to get feedback, we're just going to have to slightly delay the meeting until that's taken care of, and then we're going to bring her back on for this and any other vote. But she certainly wants to participate in this event and is allowed to under our board policy for absent board members. All right, at this time, I would say just we'll bring in Mr. Schaefer. Good evening, Mr. Schaefer. I believe you know everybody here. We know you. So at this time, I'm going to ask each of you 5 questions, the same 5 questions, and take your time, answer as long as you feel you need to. And neither candidate has seen the questions. And because of the circumstances, we actually didn't use any direct questions from in the past. These are all ones that we came up, at least the wording of them, to be suitable for the event tonight. So the first question would be, what do you believe are the duties and responsibilities of the school board director?
So obviously there are legal responsibilities in terms of having a budget, in terms of hiring a superintendent, in terms of participating in the hiring of other administrators, and then there's the legal requirements, which usually don't involve direct board input of hiring or firing other employees. Obviously, the budget is a key issue for any school board, and then there's overall policy. Since I became a candidate, I've attended a number of webinars that are, to try to orient school board candidates to what these responsibilities might be. And the one thing that it was hammered home was that the board should not micromanage. The board should deal with, a policy through the superintendent. Shouldn't directly get involved over the head of the superintendent with individual schools. But on the other hand, there are broad policies that the board has the responsibility of making. In Pennsylvania, we have a relatively weak statewide mandates. That has changed, obviously, in the last 15, 18 years with BSSAs and Keystones, which have have required the school district to follow more state mandates. And obviously, even as Dr. Lighty said earlier, he's got to fill out forms or reports for federal funding, so the school board has to follow federal mandates in many, many cases. But the school districts in Pennsylvania, as compared to or contrasted to a number of other states, have fairly wide leeway about curriculum and other types of policies. And so those are ultimately the responsibility of the board. Hopefully they can be worked out with the superintendent and with other people who work for the district and with the community as well.
Good, thank you. What would your priorities be as a school board director?
I think there's a lot of things that one cannot know in advance. I'm sure those of you who've lived through the last 4 years never thought that your priority was going to be, how to deal with masking and how to deal with hybrid education or things like that. So on one level, I think it's premature to say what a particular priority would be. I think as having been a candidate for this, not for this particular position, but for a position on the school board, I think my priority was to preserve much of the character of Mechanicsburg as has been in existence for, certainly since I moved here 25 years ago, and much of the recent things. So just for example, I was impressed when I've been at school board meetings with the ideas of as was just discussed earlier, the feeling of community, of belongingness, of including children as stakeholders in the district, preparing young people to be interconnected citizens, part of a larger community. So I think that the board has and the district has done a pretty good job of that over the years. I felt in my campaign that, not from my particular opponent, who I respect, but I felt that there might be voices seeking election to this board who might challenge or disparage some of those policies and initiatives. And so part of my reason for wanting to be on the board was, in essence, to preserve more or less the types of things that were already happening. So that's certainly a priority. Issues of students' freedom to read, critical thinking in social studies, which is my background area, but in other areas as well. I don't have any complaints with the way the district or the board has handled those in recent years, but certainly that would be a priority to try to preserve those. The only other thing that I would say, and it's actually, I think it was last meeting, it might have been 2 meetings ago, somebody talked about, there was a proposal for the high school for a hydroponics lab. And not that I'm saying, yeah, hydroponics is the way to go as a be-all and end-all, but the idea of innovative, using technology in an innovative way, thinking about science in an innovative way, sustainability. I think the school boards in general can move a little bit further in that direction. I'm not aware enough in terms of Mechanicsburg to say where our, what we've already done and what we should be moving. But I think the issue of sustainability in regards to science and technology is another area that I would be interested in.
What would you find most difficult and most rewarding about being a member of the school board?
So absolutely the most difficult thing would be finances. You know that I've been at these meetings since last winter, and I do try to read much of the reports on the online agenda before coming to the meetings. I could not make heads or tails of most of those financial reports, and I can only, give my plaudits to those who, you have to vote on. If I were to be on it, I'd have to vote on it. And I would be nervous, anxious, I'm not sure what the word is, but to be responsible for, I believe it's a $93, $96 million budget, something like that, and yes, I voted for this, and I may or may not know what I was voting on. That's, to me, the most difficult. Obviously, Mrs. Morgan has been doing this a long time, and I'm going to say that I certainly would trust her judgment and Mr. Longwell's, but that would be the thing that I would find to be most difficult. Most rewarding, I think, would be to, you've all said it when you have the students and faculty giving their presentations. Obviously, being on the board gives one a very intimate, well, maybe not intimate, but a much stronger view of what's happening in the schools and all the schools than you might otherwise get from just being a member of the community. My kids are grown, so I don't have that immediate day-to-day feedback that I used to have, but certainly I still would appreciate being kept up with what the tips that I've seen looking at board agendas over the last year. Seeing that civil rights course, and there was earlier, I think it was the AP English in high school, voting on what textbook, and I know some of those teachers, and I appreciate the way that teachers are involved in making policy, and I think that would be rewarding as a board member to see how, well, to see the teachers as well as the counselors, other staff, and even the students taking ownership of what they're doing in the district. So I think that's where I would find meaning, joy, whatever, in being on the board.
Mr. Rupp, with the larger audience we have, including the people online, I guess it's a good opportunity to thank Mr. Longwell, as you have, Mr. Schaefer, for all the work you do to help all of us with the numbers that we review, and the multi-hour budget sessions, which are necessary to go through such complex things, but also provide some reassurance to us on how everything gets put together. So I think it's a fair answer, of course, but I just wanted to maybe shout out you as well. And it's there is the maybe mystery at the beginning, but it gets demystified later as we go through the whole process. So not a contradiction, but more to reassure everyone else. There's a lot going on, but it's all good.
Mr. Schaefer, what do you believe is the greatest strength of the school district and the greatest weakness?
Well, I think the greatest strength is that I have seen is the involvement of teachers and staff. Well, I would say two greatest strengths. The involvement of teachers and staff in doing things in the schools and working together with the administrators, and certainly in that regard, the relative comity, the relative peaceableness that the board has had over quite a number of years. Again, some of the pandemic issues would be an exception, but I think we have avoided a lot of the trauma that some other districts have gone through. The relative longevity of some of the administrators is a strength of the district. I might not always agree with everything. I think there are a lot of things that I have seen where reasonable people can disagree about this or that, but certainly I've never questioned the sincerity of either administrators or board members in doing what they're doing. So I think that's one of the strengths. The other strength is the willingness of the board and the administrators to embrace, certainly to deal with and even to embrace the changing demographics of the district. The district is not the same that it was 25 years ago when we moved here, or or even long ago, as many in Mechanicsburg might might remember. So there are changes in the student population, there's certainly changes in teacher expectations, and I think the a strength of the district, a major strength of the district, has been its willingness, eagerness to try to serve all members of the district both equally and now I learn equitably as well in that regard. Weaknesses of the district. I mean, it's one of those trick questions you get as a, when you're applying for a job. What's your biggest weakness as a potential employee? And you're supposed to say, oh, I am so eager to do everything that I sometimes do too much. So I'm not trying to be fawning or obsequious here, but I honestly can't think of anything that comes to mind as a major weakness of the district. Maybe when I'm on the board, I will learn some of the dirty little secrets, but I'm not privy to those yet.
And what do you believe are the challenges faced by students and families today?
Well, there are a lot of challenges. There's the immediate challenges of the last 4 years with regard to the pandemic that have just disrupted so much in terms of any educator, and this was drilled into me when I became an educator, and to a certain extent I drilled it into my students, that patterns, regularity, consistency is enormously helpful to students, that if they see things going in all different directions, then that's going to be confusing to young people almost across the board. And so when this district and every other district in the country was thrown for a loop by the pandemic, that had its immediate problems and challenges, and we're obviously still dealing with the fallout, with the aftermath of those. So I know from my former colleagues at Shippensburg University, that students coming into SHIP, there were just certain habits that we would have expected students to come into school knowing what to do, and those got thrown out of whack. Again, I'm not privy on a day-to-day level with regard to Mechanicsburg or even K-12, but I am fairly confident that I would say the same thing, is true. You certainly read about it in the papers, if you still read the papers, which gets to the next challenge. But so, I think the learning loss, but more than that, the community loss, the sense of belonging loss from the pandemic, the sense of not just loss, but the sense that I don't feel a responsibility, or I may not feel as much of a responsibility to my peers, to my teachers, to the school, because I was thrown for a loop by so many things. So that's one, and I think that was occurring in the broader context of technological changes and social changes that that have made things perhaps more intense or more difficult. Obviously, social media put certain challenges on students that weren't there 15, 20 years ago. I think the technology, the availability of cell phones certainly had, obviously the advantages are numerous, and any parent will tell you that the ability to know where one's child is, with cell phones is infinitely more comforting than things were 20, 30 years ago when you had to wait for your child to call you. Whose house are you at now, or are you staying at for that after-school event or not? I don't know. So I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying technology is inherently problematic, but I think there were certain problems with the use of computers or the use of particularly with cell phones in schools that cause certain challenges and still do. Some school districts embrace the use of cell phones, the availability of cell phones by students. I think there's, and I was not part of that. I think some districts are stepping back a little bit from that. But it is, it's going to be a challenge to having students participate in class, being able to keep their attention, all kinds of things like that are those challenges. The issue of gun violence is obviously a challenge. You mentioned the health and safety report earlier. To a large extent, all you can do is cross your fingers, with regard to guns. The districts, this district, and all of the districts that I went into as a social studies student with my social studies student teachers, getting into a school is different than it was 25 years ago as a visitor, with good reason, but it's still a problem. So those are three that I would mention, challenges that students and parents face. Actually, let me make one more. The expectation by parents, partly because of technology and partly because of other social changes, the expectation by parents that they will get immediate feedback about what their students have done in school, and that with email or whatever they can call up a teacher or an administrator, or they can not call up, but contact and expect to get something back. That on the one hand that has been great. You get grades, go to parents, to rely on the child to give a report card to their parents. There is that much stronger immediate feedback, but it also raises expectations that everything is going to be available to parents, on a moment's notice. And if a child doesn't pass a test, the parent says, well, how come my child didn't pass the test? Everything seemed to be going well. This is a new motive or a new issue that has come up. So there are expectations by parents that in some cases are unrealistic, and that is one thing that has led to challenges for teachers. That the job of a teacher is in some ways a little more difficult than it used to be, maybe a lot more difficult, because of those expectations that may have been raised. So going a little bit from children and parents over to teachers.
Very good. Thank you. That concludes the questions we have for you. So at this time, Mr. Longwell, if you'd like to get Mr. Bradley in. And Mr. Schaefer, again, be appreciated if you would go out, but you're more than welcome. You've already been asked the question, so you're more than welcome to stay if you'd like.
I'll go up.
And then we'll get both of you when it's time.
Okay, cool.
Good evening, Mr. Bradley.
Good evening.
We're going to ask you 5 questions, the same questions we asked Mr. Schaefer, and more than welcome to take your time before you answer them, and also answer as thoroughly as what you desire or see fit.
How long did we lose Ms. Morgan for?
She was walking the last.
Okay, perfect, sorry.
She just can't talk yet, which is one of the issues. So starting, Mr. Bradley, is What do you believe are the duties and responsibilities of a school board director?
There are many aspects of a school board director. It's looking at a variety of different stakeholders that are part of the school district. The stakeholders include the students, the teachers, the parents, the community at large that may not necessarily have children in the school district, such as either the older taxpayers or the younger parents or residents that don't have families yet. So as a school board member, it's important that you always remember to keep in mind some of the primary mission of what we're trying to do as a school board, as well as keep in mind those stakeholders. And when I say the primary mission, our primary mission is to build the person of the future, educate our kids, educate them in a way that they'll be prepared for going forward in life, whether that's in a technical realm, whether it's educational realm, whether it's military, or whatever field that they think they're going to go into. So it's our job to help mold and mentor them and provide the tools for them that'll allow them to continue to move forward with that. At the same time, we also have to be conscious, as some of the board members have mentioned over the years, we always have to be conscious about what's our impact to the community at large as well. You know, our primary goal is to provide that mechanism for the students to succeed. But at the same token, we also have to take into consideration the people that are around the community and that are supporting them, so that we make sure we never alienate them from the process of educating. You know, it is important that that community is around them to help educate them and drive them forward. So as a board, we always have to be conscious of and looking at what's our impact to that whole group. In particular, our impact to the students. Are we supporting our teachers? Are we supporting the administrators? And then how are we servicing the community at large? The community at large may not have as much of a focus as the students, but we have to at least consider them and think about them as we're focusing in on what we as a board would do to support the school district to continue to educate the children.
Thank you. What would your priorities be as a school board member?
Priorities would be to continue to look at the changes coming forward in education and look at how to adapt and adopt those changes in education, as well as not lose focus of what our core mission is, and that is to build that good citizen for the future. It's also to make sure that we provide an opportunity for these students to succeed and provide a safe environment for them where they do not have to worry about the struggles, the violence, things that could distract them or inhibit them from getting a good, solid education. And so it's that continuous focus of creating the appropriate environment. It's also, as a board, my focus will be to continue to look at how can we support the teachers, because the teachers are the central part of all of this. They are the ones that spend most of the time guiding and mentoring and molding and encouraging and developing the students. And so we need to continue to ensure that we provide the appropriate support for them, provide the appropriate tools for them, the appropriate opportunities for them to be successful in their job, because if they're successful in their job, then they will continue to use those tools for the students. Also, we have to focus in on, trying to keep the taxes to a minimum for the many people in the community. There are certain things that we need to make sure that we continue to fund, make sure that we continue to provide for, but on the same token, just be conscious of what the impact is to the community in large as we continue. We could build the biggest and most luxurious schools in the area, but is that right thing to do? Is that the fiscally responsible thing to do, where we minimize that impact to the people that we are supporting, the community at large?
What would you find most difficult and most rewarding about being a member of the school board?
Well, most rewarding is always seeing the results of the work that we do. The opportunities that we have had over the years to either go into the schools or to have the students come to us. That's the most rewarding. The most rewarding is to hear from people. I'm not sure why I did this, but I spent 8 hours on election day over a course of different time just talking to people at the polling place near my house, and just talking to them about issues, about things that they're concerned about, hearing about their gratitude for what the school district has done to help mold their kids and build their kids and strengthen their kids, and talk about what's important to them. And so having that opportunity to talk with them and communicate with them has been very valuable.
What do you believe is the greatest strength of the school district and the greatest weakness?
Greatest strength. We are still a great community where people are seeking out to come to us, to come to the school district because of the teachers, because of the way that we do education here in Mechanicsburg. And we need to continue to move forward with that, to continue to attract people and draw people in. Weaknesses, that's a good question. We have to remember to provide the right level of support for teachers and make sure that our kids remember that it's important to be good citizens in the classroom, being respectful, being attentive, giving the teachers their due respect as far as that is concerned. And of course, we are a little bit on our financial heavy side, that we have to be careful with our financial spending. We have done that over the years of watching and getting to a point where we get close to our debt ceiling and our debt limit. So we just have to be careful of it. And I wouldn't say that's a weakness, but that's something that we always have to keep in the forefront of what's the impact financially of what we're doing? What other things do we have? We know that there's more to come potentially, of more additional construction or more additional enhancements that we have to do, but we always have to be careful of keeping in mind that financial aspect, that aspect of, as I said before, being careful that we don't impact families too heavily by burdening them with additional taxes and additional expenses. It's not a weakness of ours, but it's an area that we need to continue to focus and continue to look at and continue to be attentive to as we continue to move forward with other things and other plans that we have within the school district.
And lastly, what do you believe are the challenges faced by students and families today?
There are so many challenges. We think about the world in and of itself and the many things that are going on in the world around us. We think about the culture of the kids growing up these days. Our generation is different from the generation today. There are different struggles and different things that we didn't have when we were growing up. So we have to continue to pay attention to that, continue to provide that opportunities for them to be able to feel included, be able to feel safe, be able to feel appreciated, to be encouraged, to be also to be, and this may sound a little funny, be vulnerable in the sense of being open to being molded, being willing to work with the teachers, work with the parents, and work with the administration to build everything. I think the key is that we make sure that the support continues with the kids and the families, and that it's that combined. It's not the school that's going to develop the child. It's the school with the parents working together to figure out how to encourage, how to build, how to motivate, how to incentivize, how to ensure that they are successful today and successful in the future. And make sure that we continue to foster that relationship between the parents and the schools. We hear too often that there are places where the school wants to take too much control. The parents want to have ultimate control. I think it works best when together as a community, the parents and the teachers work together to figure out the right way to build and motivate and encourage growth in these kids as the years go on.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Bradley, if you'd like to have a seat in the audience, and Mr. Longwell, if you'd like to bring the other candidate in, and then I'll open it up to the board to. This time, as I open it up to the board to have conversation and discussion on it, I'd just like to start, I'll start and I'll just say, wow, I think it's very difficult here. I think we have two excellent candidates, and I hope regardless of the outcome that they both keep an interest in serving on the school board. I just think it's just it'll be a very tough decision here. My ears are open and my mind's open. Is there any other comments on anybody? From anybody?
I would agree with what you said. I don't have any different comments, but I agree with what you said. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan, do you have any conversation you would like to bring up before we take the vote?
No, I agree with you that both candidates were very, it was very interesting listening to both of them.
Yeah, I hate to make it seem like we aren't deliberating. This isn't a deliberative type of thing. It's sort of here in front of us, right? So, you know, the idea of we should be talking about this for 15 minutes seems odd too, but I don't want to seem like we go right to the vote. It seems like it's all said and done, but if we.
Well, and that was why my initial statement before
Yeah.
the whole process started. It's very difficult for everybody involved.
Sure.
But I mean, if anybody wants to have conversation, now is the actual only time we can do it. And if we don't come to a consensus here, we'll reopen the floor again and hopefully get some more dialogue going to maybe come to a consensus tonight.
But then you can try to arm wrestle people.
But I mean, it never hurts to bring something up now. It's entirely, that's up to each person. Seeing none, Mr. Longwell, roll call vote.
All right, we'll have a roll call, a voice vote, where each board director indicates which of the two candidates for who they are voting. And we'll begin with Mr. Burkhardt.
Mr. Bradley.
Dr. Lebo,
Mr. Bradley.
Mrs. Maris,
Mr. Schaefer.
Ms. Morgan,
Mr. Bradley.
Mr. Stanker,
Mr. Bradley.
and Mr. Rupp.
Mr. Bradley.
That would be a vote of having achieved 5 votes, the minimum necessary. That would be a vote for the affirmative for Mr. Bradley.
All right, and just again, so the public knows what's going on, as Mr. Bradley was leaving his seat, he's going to be sworn in tonight to fill the remainder of this 2-year seat, at which time his seat is vacant. We must fill that seat within 30 days. That was done through the normal general election process, and that seat will be filled on December 12th. But for the purpose of being able to continue with as full a board as possible, we're going to have Mr. Bradley sworn in right now to fill for the remainder of the seat that he was just voted on to be on. And as I said, Mr. Schaefer, I mean it absolutely. I certainly hope you stay involved. And I mean that sincerely. I really do. It was very difficult. So just time, Mr. Bradley, if you'd like to come forward along with the notary, and we'll do the swearing in.
Ms. Warzinski is our notary public, among other things for the school district, also our transportation director, but in her capacity as notary public will administer the oath of office.
All right.
Serving as a notary public, the newly appointed board director will be sworn in with the oath of office. Mr. Bradley, please read the highlighted section of the oath aloud.
I, Richard Bradley, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
As Ms. Wrzezinski collects the signature there, with the reading of the oath, Mr. Bradley will be seated as Mr. Ruck shared for the unexpired term of the vacant board seat.
Time. Congratulations, Mr. Bradley. And we will move on to item 6, new business, athletics, recreation. Item 6.01, Dr. Lebo.
I'd like to ask the board to endorse the winter and spring recreation programs and staff for payroll and audit purposes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussions? I will hold off for 1 second to allow Mr. Shanker to return.
Oh, no.
I just noticed he was not in his seat. Right, Mr. Shanker, we're on item 6.01. There was a motion second. There was no discussion at this time. If you have anything you'd like to bring up, and then we'll have the vote.
My apologies.
That's okay.
No, good.
All right, Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7, new business, budget and finance. Item 7.01, Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the treasurer's report as per the attachments, which include the following. Treasurer's report for October 2023, board budget report for October 2023, general fund invoices paid, check numbers 67030 through 67275 in the amount of $1,365,028.04. Electronic payments in the amount of $6,487,429.70. General fund invoices payable, check numbers 67276 through 67290 in the amount of $1,524,581.55. Capital Reserve Fund invoices paid, check number 1876 through 1880 in the amount of $44,298.01. Series of 2020 construction fund invoices paid, check numbers 277 and 278 in the amount of $232,450.67. Series of 2023 construction fund invoices paid, check numbers 227 through 117 through 135 in the amount of $2,778,486.57, and the investment portfolio attachment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Only to say that Mrs. Morgan left you that motion to haze the new guy, I
Yes.
think, for sure.
Are those check numbers right? 227?
It's 117 to 135, yeah.
So the next to line 8 is in error, having the 227.
The 227 was extra, right? It's,
That it does belong on line 7.
yes.
Yes.
It's 117.
Does that answer your question? Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.02, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to adopt the attached Act 1 resolution establishing that the board will not raise taxes above the Act 1 index of 6.5% when approving the 2024-2025 general fund budget.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Just like to remind everybody that this is done every year under the Act 1 code, and essentially it's the administration telling us they're not going to ask for a budget in excess of the Act 1 index, which would require, obviously, a lot of additional work on our part. It is in no way saying that they're going to be asking for a 6.5% increase in that. That's based on the post-pandemic inflation number that, really gives that latitude, but I'm certainly hoping that the request comes in less than that. Or
Way
I'm
less
challenging
than
them to that.
Or
Let's put it
I'll be
that
at
way.
this board meeting out there talking to you all.
Different seat. And it's a lot
Yeah.
more fun, Mrs. Maris, when you're on that side of
I
the
am
microphone.
sure of it. And I'll bring extras, so there'll be multiple
Oh,
free
I'm sure you
minutes.
will. But that number, I mean, when we first went over the agenda, it really stands out. But that is the Act 1 code. That's the law. That's what inflation was. That's how it was adjusted. So.
To Mr. Rupp's point, it's really a procedural item that you either adopt the Act 1 index or you have to adopt a preliminary budget early. And so school boards, normally if they don't need to go above the index, they just adopt the index and live within it and then do a spring budget presentation, which is typical for what we've done in Mechanicsburg. So.
Further discussion on item 7.02. Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.03. Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to endorse the grant budgets for 2023-2024 as presented in the attached.
With a second.
Second?
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.04. Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to endorse B&S transportation rates and drivers for 2023-2024 as per the attachments.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Do we have any further discussion?
I think, just to say, I'm happy we were able to continue our partnership with BNS and stay out of the headlines that some of the other districts have faced with driver shortages. And not to say that there's anything more magical about what we do, but this, I think, is a process that's working well. So I'm happy that it's
And I mean,
working.
it's not just neighboring district, it's a nationwide problem.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Within budgetary restraints, just finding qualified drivers is not an easy task. Districts all over the country are having issues. So I do appreciate the support the board's given to do this pass-through funding to help, keep the salary adequate to keep the drivers. So.
I think you both raised a great point, and I think Ms. Worzinski might already have left, but as transportation director, she does an incredible job in the mornings and afternoons of juggling around routes and making adjustments, making sure we have filled vacancies. And so that partnership between BNS, to your point, and the work that she does, I think we've got a great partnership there. So.
Any further conversation? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.05, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to approve the fund balance commitments for June 30, 2023 as presented in the attachment.
With a second.
Second?
Further discussion. Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.06, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the tax policies report as presented in the attachment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 8, new business curriculum. Item 8.01, student service contracts. Mrs. Maris.
I make a motion to approve the student services contracts as presented in the attachment.
We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 8.02, Mrs. Maris.
Make a motion to approve the new course proposal, America's Civil Rights Movement and its Legacy, as per the attachment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I read the one book that was listed in the curriculum proposed. It's no joke. I learned a lot about the Little Rock Nine that I had no idea about. So you just assume they walk right past the the guards and got into school and everything was great. So it was not. I'll leave you with that cliffhanger if you want to read it yourself, but it was interesting.
No, and I'd just like to say, I mean, I find this course, like Mr. Schaefer had brought up in the public comment, I find this extremely exciting, and being married to a history major, and 2 summers ago actually doing the tour down there, Civil Rights Trail, it's just so neat to really see it. I know some of our district employees also did it, and as did other members of the community, including Dr. Lebo went with a group from his church. I just find it really exciting to take that kind of information and then to create a course based on that will stimulate growth. It's what education's all about. It makes people critically think, and I hope it meets that criteria as well. It doesn't become a pawn in people's chessboard as we saw in the last election. I mean, critical thinking is so important.
We talked about this during the work session, but I commend the staff, the administration on putting that course together in a climate where addressing that issue can be very volatile. I think they did a great job in constructing a syllabus that looks really interesting. I asked if I could audit the course.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, it looks really exciting, and I really hope it's a stepping stone into doing additional, elective or even compulsory, particularly history and English courses that really do raise that level of critical thinking on issues that are prevalent today, not in the past, but more of a social studies, more of a social sciences, current issues. I just hope we see growth with that with our new course proposals. Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 8.03, Mrs. Maris.
Make a motion to approve the textbook adoption AP European History as per the attachment.
Do we have a second?
Seconds.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Moving on to item 10, new business personnel, item 10.01, Mr. Bradley.
Did you skip 9?
That's it, 9.
Oh, I am so sorry. Item 9, new business facilities, item 9.01, Mr. Sanker.
I make a motion to approve the construction change orders as per the attachments.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? I do again just want to publicly thank the services of Mr. Kastner, who we use as our construction manager. I think it was probably the best decision this board made with all the renovations we've done to have somebody with his level of expertise working directly for us in the district. The savings in change orders alone over past construction jobs has been absolutely amazing. And it shows here with the lack of the major ones that we've had in the past.
Keep them within our margin is definitely, I mean, credit Mr. Castor too, but then since we also reviewed that in the work session for the facilities committee meeting, just being able to stay within there. Change orders do happen, but being mindful of all that, I think is I'm very happy with, especially with all the projects that have happened so far.
And all that can go wrong.
Yes.
And I think Miss Morgan is going to appreciate that you mentioned change orders, since that's always her hot button. So
unfortunately, she's on mute. We'll just have to go straight to the vote.
We'll keep her.
She'll be pinging us in a minute.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 9.02, Mr. Sanker.
I make a motion to authorize the release of bids for the replacement HVAC project at Elmwood Academy as per the attachments.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Mr.
Someone needs to do 10 to
Okay. We'll go to item 10, new business personnel, item 10.01. Mrs. Maris, would you take that motion, please?
Make a motion for the board to approve the personnel report as per the attachments.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'll abstain from that vote due to a conflict of interest.
And I have the same.
Any further discussion on the personnel report? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
10.02. Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the proposed medical plan consolidation where administrators will be transferred into the professional staff medical plan with a matching HSA contribution.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this item? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 10.03. Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to appoint Mr. Nick Wilson as Title IX Coordinator for Student Matters.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Dr. Light, you and I had discussed this briefly. Could you just briefly let the board know exactly what?
Yeah, so significant changes happen in how we are required now to conduct Title IX investigations at both the staff and a student level. And those changes were initially placed with the HR department, with Mrs. Stata, for both staff and students. It quickly became apparent that the magnitude of having to deal with that in one office did not make sense, nor did it align to necessarily the expertise that Mrs. Stata brings to the district. And so it made more sense to align this with Mr. Wilson's role and conducting, overseeing those investigations, if you will.
And so is there any questions for Dr. Lighted or any further discussion on the motion?
Just to be clear, Mrs. Stata then remains Title IX coordinator for staff. Right. Cool. Good.
Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 10.04. Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve a salary adjustment for the superintendent in the amount of 3% plus a 1% performance bonus effective November 1, 2023.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 10.05. Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to authorize the superintendent to attend the School Superintendents Association Conference in San Diego, California, that will be held from February 15th through 17th, 2024, for the purpose of continued professional development.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 11, new business policy. Item 11.01.
These all just say motion.
Mr. Bradley. Thanks. We'll go to someone else after.
That's okay. I'd ask the board to extend the terms of the board president and vice president until December 12, 2023, where a reorganization meeting will be held at that time.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Appreciate your continued support to December 12th.
And Mr. Brady, to answer your question on that is, the reason it was left motion is whoever was, if someone was selected tonight to fill the balance of Mr. Hartman's seat, this was his thing that he did. And therefore, since you were selected to do that, you will, if you have the voice left to do it.
I just thought it was continued hazing, as
No,
Mr. Sanders said.
try to be uniform with
That's all.
who was assigned to what tasks.
I appreciate the explanation.
Very good. Mr. Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 11.02, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of revised board policy 122, extracurricular activities, with an effective date of July 1, 2024.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Yeah, any further discussion?
Since the question was asked at the beginning of the meeting, perhaps an explanation.
Well, actually, I was going to ask Dr. Lively to do that, and I mean, it is something we did somewhat address at the work session, but I also want to make it clear in my mind and all the board and anybody in the public on why there's a difference in it and where we're at with that and why the policies were written up as they were and where we intend to go in the future.
So I feel like maybe I heard two things. One was around eligibility requirements, and those eligibility requirements will continue in administrative regulations and handbooks, whether they be athletic handbooks or the student handbooks. The second piece was the differential between the extracurricular policy where the superintendent has the authority to approve that and athletic, interscholastic athletics, where it needs to come to the school board for approval. The history there honestly goes back to several years where the board requested the authority to add and delete athletic programs in the district. I don't think I'm best to speak to why that was the decision, but that was the decision separate from extracurriculars. I think there's also a reality with extracurriculars that can ebb and flow much more so than typically athletic programs do, based on student requests and the ability to find advisors, et cetera. That doesn't mean that it couldn't come to the board, but historically speaking, that has not been the case. So if you go back 10 years, it really was based on a recommendation by the superintendent for all of that. But then I would say in the last 5 years, maybe or so, the board had changed the policy to have the board decide on additions and deletions to athletics.
Does that answer your question? And I'd just like to say is it actually was slightly longer than that. Judy Quickly was the one that who initially made the motion.
Time flies.
When the proposal was to have an AR on that, she brought up that she felt it should be a board policy. And it was unanimous at that time that for athletics that the board would be involved to make sure that it was being done consistently across the spectrum. It was a hot issue during budget cuts and things like that. That we wanted to make sure everybody was treated fairly.
I think it speaks to the difference between, we heard from the interviewees tonight about the community involvement and whether or not we have a French club or whatever, an extracurricular, doesn't really rise to the level of what we, a community impact or board level. I think I understand it from a philosophical level beyond just, this is how we do it here. Like, I think it's how we do it here, but it also makes sense to me. And I don't want to approve 50 extracurriculars and debate the merits of one or the other necessarily unless this needs to come to us in a sense.
Oh, absolutely. Any further conversation on 11.02? Schlongwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 11.03, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of revised board policy 123, interscholastic athletics, with an effective date of July 1, 2024.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further conversation? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
11.04, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of revised board policy 915, booster support organizations, with an effective date of July 1, 2024.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further conversation? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
11.05, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of new board policy 828, fraud prevention.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further conversation?
If I may, just in reference to these last four items, I want to thank the committee that worked on all of these policies and the time commitment and the timing of this approach. I know that there was some concern that could it happen as quickly as we did, and the kind of ancillary impacts which you see in four policies being approved. And in particular, thank Mr. Bitts for his leadership in conducting that work with the committee, and felt it was important to say that right before we vote.
Right. And I too would like to thank the board members that volunteered and we also served on those committees. If we're going just a little above and beyond the normal board responsibility, a lot of extra potential time. Any further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
11.06, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to ratify the adjudication of a student matter.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further conversation? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
On to item 13, board director recognition, item 13.01, Dr. Leidy.
Yes, so this is a little bittersweet and exciting at the same time. Every year we have an opportunity to recognize the service to our community that our school board has as volunteers and elected officials to this important body. It was already pointed out tonight that one of the strengths, and I would agree wholeheartedly, is the longevity of our board members. You may recall last year, within the last year or so, I've lost track of time apparently here, I had made the comment based on Bill Murray's research through the archives that if you look at the history of Mechanicsburg, not Mechanicsburg area, but Mechanicsburg School District, so we're going back into the 1800s, and some of the longest serving board members, 5 of those board members are currently serving on our board of the top 15 in that well over 100-year period. I think that speaks very much to this community, the trust and appreciation and respect that this community has for the school district. And that takes a lot of commitment from the people around this table. And even though we've doubled your pay every year, I guess that doesn't matter because 0 times 2 is still 0. So thank you for that. So this evening, it's my honor to hand out several of these certificates. I'll just read one of them that will apply to the individuals based on years of service. It's in recognition of ongoing school board service and the long-term contributions of individuals who bring their energy, talent, and values to the guidance of youth and public education in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so the first one is for Dr. Lane Lebo for 8 years of service on the board. Second one is for Mr. John Rupp for 16 years of service on our board. Next is for Mr. Rick Bradley for 16 years of service on our school board. These next two are particularly difficult for me, I got to tell you, sitting in my chair. Both of these individuals have been guides for me as a superintendent, terrific people who truly care about education, care about this community, care in particular about Mechanicsburg Area School District. And so Mr. Dennis Burkhardt, 16 years of service. Thank you. And someone who I spent considerable amount of time with every Friday for, I believe, a period of about 10 years, if I recall correctly, having conversations. I have to share with you that I still have our notes from each of those meetings. A little notebook, and I'd write the conversations that we had over that 10-year period, and you're going to see some of those notes and when the time is right. I will say that the first item that I talked with Mrs. Maris about, according to those notes anyway, as a newly seated superintendent, was about peanut allergies. So there you go. Imagine that. And the list is pretty extensive. But 2 decades of service, 20 years of service to this school district and to this community. Thank you very much, Dawn Maris, for everything you've done. I have nothing else to say.
We'll move on to item 14, hearing of visitors. We have reached the second opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents of the school district. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you'd like to address the board, please come up to the podium and share your name and district address. This is for items that were not voted on tonight. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 15. Mrs. Maris.
Make motion that we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned.